This episode of the School of Laughs podcast is brought to you by Patreon sponsor Paul Swan. If you'd like to find out more about being a sponsor through Patreon, log on to www.patreon.com/School of Laughs. We're also brought to you this week by the Clean Comedy Conference. If you're a comic and you're looking to get more bookings, more big paid bookings through corporate gigs or cruise ships, churches, colleges, or clubs, or you want to write or perform on late night TV, then this Clean Comedy Conference is a great opportunity for you. The Clean Comedy Conference is being held in San Diego, California, October 13th through the 15th. Early bird registration ends August 15th, so sign up today. There's only a few days left at cleancomedyconference.com. And as a special offer to School of Laughs listeners, use promo code School of Laughs to save $10. Go to cleancomedyconference.com today.
Welcome to the School of Laughs podcast, brought to you by schooloflaughs.com. Whether you're an aspiring comedian, a part-time pro, or a speaker who wants to become funnier, this is the podcast for you. We'll break down tools, tips, and techniques to help you get bigger, better, and more bookable. And now, here's the show.
Welcome to the podcast. Rick Roberts here. We've got part 2 of our interview with Kate Dore, who is a social media ninja. I got a ton of great feedback from a variety of places on the internet this past week on part 1 with Kate Dore, and I really thought she brought the goods, man. She laid it out, gave you a lot of things to think about, maybe some things to think about stop doing. And this week, we're just going to follow up with the second half of the interview. We're going to cover a lot of different ground today, piggyback on what we did the first week, but we're also going to talk about using your email list to get more engagement out of your subscribers, and also to use that list as kind of a hot leads list to maybe have them buy your new CD, DVD, things like that. We'll talk about MailChimp ConvertKit, how you can create Facebook custom audiences and Facebook lookalike audiences from your email list, using bit.ly links that I like to use and how I use them. We're going to talk about tracking interest in your newsletters and the stuff that you do put out through your newsletter list, through your email list. We're going to talk about using social to build relationships with people, how to share things and schedule things with Buffer or Tailwind, all kinds of great stuff, and some things you shouldn't do as well. Hey, I did want to say thanks to the Clean Comedy Conference and to Paul Swan for sponsoring the podcast. And a reminder, if you're a Patreon supporter, that our next Google Hangout will be on August 20th, Saturday, August 20th. So just a little short time away from now. And we're going to talk about some social media in that Google Hangout. If you want to find out more about being a Patreon sponsor, check that out. I'll give you some more details at the end of the podcast. But right now, let's jump right back in it. Get your pens and pads ready. Here is Kate Dore.
Tracking is everything. We were kind of talking about tracking with email and tracking with all this, but I think a lot of people, they get tied up in the how many followers do I have, or these sort of vanity metrics that aren't necessarily what's most important. For me, I'm tracking referral traffic from specific channels, which you can see in Google Analytics. And then in addition to that, I'm looking at the bounce rate from that particular channel. I'm looking at how much time spent on the page for that specific article and how long the session is. And it's really interesting. You'll find, okay, I mean, you want to obviously focus more energy on which channels have more engaged or sending more engaged traffic. So like last month, for example, of my social media traffic, I got about 60% of my social media referrals from Pinterest. I know that sounds crazy. Bloggers are doing crazy amount of traffic from Pinterest. However, those were my shortest sessions, and therefore least likely to convert, and maybe least likely to sign up for my email list, which is my ultimate goal. Facebook and Twitter individually were about half as much. Both of those were pretty strong, but about half as much as Pinterest. But those had more than double the amount of time spent on page,
right.
more than double the amount of pages, and a much, much lower bounce rate. So I think that's really important to look. If you're not familiar with Google Analytics, I think the best thing you can do is certainly make sure it's installed on your website,
right,
as a starting point. And there's a plugin that you can use to install it and make sure it's the code is part of every single page. But from there, going in there and just looking at these things, there's nothing worse than, you have to experiment with a bunch of things to see what works. But once you have a bunch of once you've been experimenting for a few months, then you have a few months of data to take a look at. And again, spending more of your time in what's working and less time in what's not really working. You
Right.
know?
Do you look at, you laid out some metrics there and like things that you look at, statistics.
Mm-hmm.
What trends have you noticed for you that you're really excited about? Like, I'm going to do way more of this because it's paying off better for you, because it's going to be different from everybody.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, like I was just saying about a lot of bloggers, I hear them say, oh, well, Twitter isn't really that useful for me, except that that's where the media is. That's how I'm building relationships with media.
Okay.
And I say, well, actually, I'm getting a lot of traffic from Twitter. About 15% of my social media referral traffic came from Twitter, which I think is pretty good. So, which is, significant. That's hundreds of referrals a month. But I noticed that those people, again, a lower bounce rate, longer time spent on page, those are people who clearly are more engaged with the content that I'm putting out there, and Twitter for me, I think, is like everyone has their channel where they're most comfortable. I think Twitter is that for me, mainly just because I've used it to build relationships with other bloggers. I've used it to build relationships with media. I mean, for example, this life hacker, that's a person, the writer who wrote the life hacker article this morning. That's a relationship I built on Twitter. That's a person I followed, whose content I shared, over the years.
Right.
And again, like any social media channel, it's a long game. You're not thinking of necessarily quick wins, but building relationships over time, sharing other people's content, they share your content. There's enough to go around.
Sure.
And
that's a great point, and it's kind of maybe come back to the comic who's like, I can't blog post every week. You could link to your favorite video from another comedian.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the first, maybe if you're only posting 4 times a month, the first week, that's what you do automatically.
Mm-hmm.
So on one Saturday morning, you could wake up with a cup of coffee and find 12 videos.
Yep.
And boom, click a link, make a little post. This is my buddy doing some stand-up blog.
Yeah.
And then you're done with a fourth of your media for the entire year, right? And then figure out what your second week does. But sharing people, they're always going to thank you, especially if it's noticeable. If you're doing it more than once.
Yep.
I know for a fact that people that share my podcast little blurbs on Facebook with other people, I'll always respond to them quicker if I can, if they have a question, and if they've got something cool, I always thumbs up and share it. So don't be greedy with your time on social media, and curating content. If it's stuff your listeners and followers and watchers like, it's just as important as putting out your own stuff.
Yeah, and I'll say so for Twitter, for example, I use Buffer to schedule my tweets every day. I have some bloggers who I'm auto sharing their posts no matter what. I have a relationship where we auto share each other's stuff. It's like an RSS feed that just automatically tweets it, which is awesome. But in addition to that, I'll schedule probably at least six to 8 tweets a day. I try to do it 7 days a week. People say, like, what? Why bother on the weekend? Weekend is like
the busiest, right?
Weekend is the most engagement because no one else is sharing anything. Everyone's sleeping in. That it's amazing. Like, that's a missed opportunity right there. I feel like if you're not sharing content on the weekends, it's like missed opportunity. And you can do it in a batch. I'll do it on the weekend. I've got a day job.
Right.
I got a day job. I don't have time to be. I have a day job where I'm managing social media for a software company full time. I don't have time to be scheduling content during the week for Cashville Skyline. But what I'll do is I will schedule everything. Maybe spend a couple of hours on the weekend getting everything all set up, and then I'll take a little, like a 20-minute, maybe over my lunch break, I'll spend 20 minutes a day engaging with people, because the engagement part of it's important too, not just sharing.
Right.
You want to be, of course, interacting with people, and that's part of building relationships and building trust with your audience. But it's amazing how much more you can, with using a tool like Buffer. And I'll share probably, for example, on Twitter, I'll do maybe every third or every fourth tweet will be something of mine. Everything else is other people's stuff. And if it's someone that I'm trying to build a relationship with, I'll make sure that I mention them. And they see it and people appreciate it. I share things that I think are legitimately good and legitimately valuable to my followers. It's not just like a thing where I'm trying to get attention of some big influencer.
Right.
Which I think certainly, it can look like that, but it's really like, no, this is a really valuable article that I found, and I want to share it. And sometimes not just sharing the name of the article, but maybe writing some kind of creative copy around it, that may get a retweet from that person, and
right.
it's really, it's about experimenting and seeing what works. But also if I get a new follower who, again, like maybe someone in my niche, an influential person that I want to build a relationship with, I'll reply them and say, hey, awesome, thanks for the follow. Like, I would never do automatic.
Right.
No automatic like replies to people, and definitely no automatic DMs. That's like my number one
direct message
thing that I hate. Automatic DMs on Twitter is like a worst nightmare for somebody who's running social media
right.
for any company or even yourself, just because it clutters up your DM inbox and it makes it hard to keep track of like actual conversations you're having.
Right.
But if it's someone that you really want to like, hey, it's cool that we connected, like maybe in like a little personal, like, oh, hey, I'm from Massachusetts too. That's really cool that we connected.
Right.
Something genuine.
And I would
goes a long
imagine
way.
same thing goes for like the generic LinkedIn defaults, right?
Yep.
I would like to add you to my professional,
Yep.
I always would write the first couple of sentences, go, Anna, while we're here, I'd like to add you to my LinkedIn, and tell them maybe why. And the other thing I was thinking when you're talking about sharing content, it's one thing just to retweet it, but as you mentioned, saying something about it. If you're sharing it with your followers, share the little sentence of why I think you followers would like this post. Especially if the title might seem a little confusing or not direct enough. Hey, this is a great post about how you can build your newsletter list.
Yeah.
And I think you guys would dig this.
Yeah.
And that way it gives it a little personal touch. And if it's, say, a comedian, say if I shared a video of some comic I liked, I could comment on why I like that bit.
Yeah.
His use of this technique here or the timing, just watch how he waits for the laugh, And that also shares how I'm thinking about comedy to the people who follow what I do.
Yeah.
So it's kind of getting inside your own brain to share things with other people.
Yeah.
And make that connection.
True. I mean, because you do have expertise. Whether we all think we don't have expertise, but there's a reason people are following us.
Right.
They're interested in what we have to say, and when we're sharing something, they're interested in why we're sharing something.
Right.
Why should I click this link? Here's why.
Yeah. No, I was even telling my son this the other day. It's like when you see a flock of geese flying. They all take a turn in the front, and when they get tired, they go to the back, and then they kind of cycle back up. And everybody at some point throughout the week, throughout the day, throughout the month, you're doing something where people go, wow, that's pretty cool. So you're pulling that group along with you. But then you got to chill out and sit in the back a little bit and repost a few things and work your way back up. You can't always be in the front all the time. You're going to kill yourself trying to, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think, and I also and with Facebook, my Facebook page, I also schedule that in advance, but I do that directly through the Facebook app. But I'll do it for like a week at a time, and same exact thing. In LinkedIn, I mentioned earlier, I use Buffer for LinkedIn as well for sharing some posts, like maybe one post a day.
And that's for your Facebook fan page, right?
My Facebook fan page, I usually share about 3 posts a day.
Okay.
LinkedIn, I've been doing once a day. Twitter is probably 6 to 8 tweets a day, including on the weekends. I try to do everything on the and Pinterest, I'm doing like 40 pins a day. It's crazy. That's insane.
That's a lot. You can pre-schedule that many things?
Through a tool called Tailwind. I use that to help me schedule. I mean, all this stuff, it takes, I'm not going to lie, it takes me, there are certainly ways that I could probably be more efficient in the process.
Sure, but you learn as you go.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's with any of these productivity tools, you kind of learn, like, we're all trying to save ourselves time.
Right.
So that it doesn't, because social media can be a massive time suck. I mean, I can get swallowed up in Twitter for like half the day.
Right.
But in the end of the day, it's like, you want to be creating content. That's what's most important. And maybe if you're sitting on Twitter goofing off all day, that could be time where maybe you're creating a really awesome Facebook Live post, or maybe you're recording something or writing a blog post and, or working on your newsletter, creating things.
Well, at the very least, if you've got screen capture software, you could go through your Twitter feed and make comments as you're going down, scrolling through your Twitter feed maybe. And then you post that video so people see how you process the Twitter. I mean, that's kind of random, but that's something you could do to at least be somewhat productive.
Yeah.
Repurpose that time.
Yeah, and another thing that is really handy for me on Twitter, I use Twitter lists a ton.
Tell me a little bit about Twitter lists, because I know I should have some lists. I just have never set up a list.
So, okay. This is another kind of common misconception I think people have. People think it's not really that, everybody wants to have 1 million followers and then be following 3 people.
Right.
People think that looks really cool. I don't care. I want to drive traffic to my website. I don't necessarily want to be following 1 million people and have no one following me, but I don't really care if I've got over 5,000 followers and then I'm following 4,000 people. That's fine. I follow anyone back who seems to be actually interested in what I have to do, because I see that as a relation, building a relationship with that follower. So obviously that makes it tough with my feed,
right?
Because I'm following over 4,000 people. But what I do is I create, and they can either be public or private, lists of different people. So I have clients, financial advisor clients. I have a Twitter list of financial advisors. I have a Twitter list of a community of people from a conference I go to. I have a list of people in Nashville. I have a list of other personal finance bloggers. I have a list of media. And then you can go to those lists and you can create, like, if you have like 10 influencers that you want to build relationships with, make it private, and they can see the name of the list. That's good to know, because if it's like, people I really want to get to know, you don't want to put like some like
people who can hook me up.
Exactly.
People who have a bigger list than me.
I usually will just put something like, personal finance superstars or some cheesy thing like that.
Oh yeah, something kind of a pat on the back.
Yeah, kind of funny, but like people will be happy they're being added to it, but maybe they don't really know what it is. I'll make it private, and maybe there's like 15 influencers that I want to build relationships with. Then I'll go to that list maybe once every few days or so, and I'll try to interact. I'll use some of that live engagement time to interact with those people.
Okay.
Whether that's retweeting what they're sharing or maybe responding what they're saying. That's just kind of a quick way of like narrowing down your followers.
No, it's good because it needs to be done.
Yeah.
And plus, the stuff you want to share with one group's not always great for the other.
Yep.
And if they see too many stuff that's not great for them, they unfriend you,
well,
unfollow you.
It's not. It doesn't separate. Anyone who's following you is going to see any of your updates. But this is more just for narrowing down which updates you're seeing.
Right. The incoming.
So, yeah, because otherwise, again, like I said, I have over 4,000 people I'm following on Twitter. There's no way I'm going to see every important tweet. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
But if I go to my little list of 20 influencers that I really want to interact with, or maybe I want to spend some time on, some other bloggers I know, maybe I want to interact with them a little bit. That's a really easy way to do it. Twitter lists just kind of a way of organizing your followers for engagement, for real-time engagement.
And do they see how many other people are in that group, or they not know?
If it's private, they can't see.
Okay.
If it's public, then they can see who else is on the list.
Okay. Now, say I did want to only send out a tweet to those people on that list. Is there a way to do that? No. So it's just
no. Anyone who's following you will be able to see it. Although Twitter has kind of played around with the algorithm a little bit, and they'll have like the while you were away, and like they kind of, I've noticed on some profiles, some people who are more active on Twitter, it'll show like maybe their, I don't know, the top 3. It's interesting because it's not on every single profile, and it's not all the time, but I think it's just an example of how they're kind of messing with their algorithm a little bit as well. With, you're not necessarily, this stuff is in real time, but when you go to someone's profile, I'm noticing like some of their top tweets from like the last few days are kind of at the top, but then it's almost like they had like, I noticed there's like a featured column, and then you just click on the next one, it says tweets, and tweets are like, real time, like chronological, like the normal. It's interesting. I think it's interesting to see that
they're working on something over there.
Well, they're trying to make money. They're trying to become a profitable company, and Twitter has consistently struggled. As much as I love it, it's consistently struggled to grow its user base.
Do you think that's partly because some people thought they should get into it and see if it's something that they're into, and they find out that it's not, or that the people that are successful with Twitter have streamlined it for themselves in a way to where people think they can't compete with the people that are good at Twitter? Like there is when you go from profile to profile, some people 3 million followers, some people 3 followers,
right.
And so you think the people that are sitting there with 15 or 20 are like, yeah, it's not my thing, and they bail out?
Yeah, I think it's confusing and it's inaccessible for a lot of people. Like just little things like, and they've made some changes, but little things like trying to come up with something witty in 140 characters. Right. No, it's not all of us are that, that clever in such a short amount of words. So I think that makes it challenging. Just little things like just kind of the nuances of like kind of what's okay in terms of like at replying people, or like how you interact with people. It's not quite as intuitive as Facebook is. Right. And so for that reason, I think, some people maybe tried it and gave up. Again, it's struggled, and they're trying some different things to try to grow. You think ads have ran some people off? No. Not really. No, Twitter ads, I don't think have really been that prevalent, to be honest. I don't think Facebook ads are everyone's using Facebook ads. Twitter ads are still, people are using it, companies are using it, and there's definitely, it can be done it can be done effectively, but it's expensive still. And so it's not, I don't think it's the ads. I think it's just the using the tool, and I think people find it kind of overwhelming. Like you said, like, oh, I have no one's following me. I'm tweeting out into the tweeting out into like, it's like I'm yelling in the middle of the forest. Like no one's
Yeah, no one's ever
listening and
retweeted
no one cares.
anything.
Yeah, no one's interacting with me. No one cares what I have to say. I think that could be a little intimidating for some people.
Yeah, I'm sure. Now, if let's say a comic or a speaker listening, or any of the people listening, we got independent artists and musicians too. They're thinking, I want to try to spend some time on the social media, but also I've got a few dollars. If I spend a couple $100 a month, is that enough to make a dent in anything? Enough to experiment with something? If you were a comic listening who, just kind of starting out, but you've got some content to send people to, what would be a good use of a couple $100 a month? How far can that actually go?
Yeah, well, assuming that your website is exactly where it needs to be, and that you have your email collection software in place.
Okay, so those would be the first two things before.
Yeah, assuming that those things, because again, if you're trying to drive traffic somewhere, you want to make sure that you're driving them someplace worthwhile. If you have a crappy website, or you, again, or you're not trying to collect email addresses, they kind of get lost.
Right.
The traffic comes, but where do they go after that?
You want to drive to a steakhouse, not a Crystal. So if your website's a Crystal,
yeah,
they're only going to spend Crystal money at a Crystal.
Yeah, something that's attractive and kind of a good user experience, easy to navigate, all those things. So assuming your website's in good shape and that you've got some software in place to collect some email addresses, from there, honestly, the way I would spend money would be if you're feeling overwhelmed, maybe hire a virtual assistant or some sort of assistant to help you with either creating content, because this can be overwhelming. Mm-hmm. I mean, creating all this content, 7 days a week, it's a lot. Somebody who's savvy, I know a lot of bloggers who, a lot of small business owners in general who hire assistants to help with some of this stuff. So that may be a good use of time. I think Facebook ads are worth investing in. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. Mm-hmm. I promote probably all of my blog posts. I usually spend about $10 a week. It's not a huge spend, but it drives a lot. It drives a lot of traffic to my posts. I think that's worthwhile. I've used it to promote events, at Outback concerts, but also with events I've done after that too. Facebook ads are worth, and it doesn't have to be a huge expenditure either. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's a nice thing. I mean, as little as $5, you can experiment with something and see the short-term benefits. And if you're following your Google Analytics and you see that it definitely drove some people there, not just click, but they stuck around, then that's something you want to replicate and send to more people.
Yeah.
What would be? Let's go back to that virtual assistant thing for a second. So where are places that people can find a virtual assistant? Not that I'm asking for myself, but maybe perhaps I am.
There's a few different websites that have a lot of freelance social media marketers that you can hire part-time. For example, like Upwork, Elance. There's a website called Cloud Peeps that has a lot of social media marketers, or even just asking in your network. You'd be surprised. Like, a lot of people have assistants, and maybe those assistants are really good. I think that's the best way, is through your network of people. Say, I'm looking for a virtual assistant, or I'm looking for an assistant.
Because they know you a little bit.
Yeah, they know you, and maybe they know the work of someone. They're already working with someone, or maybe they have worked with someone in the past who has those skills.
Right.
Because to be honest, I mean, even if you're, and obviously it varies based on someone's skills, how much you're going to pay them, but you have to think, how much is your time? This all goes back to the money thing. For me, there's some tasks, if you think like, how much is an hour of my time worth?
Right.
If I'm going to spend 4 hours or 3 hours every weekend scheduling social media, when I could be creating blog posts, or I could be, I have freelance writing clients. If I'm not writing articles, I'm not getting paid. Mm-hmm. The same thing goes for artists. If you're not, again, maybe you're writing jokes, or you're working on booking gigs for yourself. Those are money-making things. Right. Whereas scheduling social media may not be. So maybe you work with a virtual assistant who can help you schedule some of that stuff and save you some time. It can be a little tough to stomach the initial investment, but I think it's worthwhile.
And some of those tasks, just to be frank, are pretty mind-numbing. I mean, when I'm dragging over articles that I found online that I like and dropping into a Bitly, then copying that into my auto tweet, it's important to a certain degree, but is it the most important use of my time?
Right.
The creating content, any artist creating what made you who you are is the number one thing.
Number one thing. Absolutely.
And so I think you actually have a great blog post on what is your time worth, right? Mm-hmm. What is an hour of your time?
Yeah.
I would recommend going to Cashville Skyline and checking that article out as a starting point to think about how you value your time. And there's other ways you can figure it out. You can take your yearly income and divide it into 40 hours a week if you want to think of it that way. But even if you only do that, I think you'll see that your hourly rate, if you're actually out there making some damage, doing some damage as a comedian, your hourly rate's going to be over $50, $100 sometimes You know, so if you can
That's
pay
true.
somebody $40 to do something,
Yeah,
you're still
right.
$10 ahead. Now, it'll be way further on the other scale for somebody when they're first starting.
Yeah.
So you have more time than you have income when you first start.
Exactly.
With a lot of artist type things. So when you're feeling that little pull back and forth,
Yeah,
maybe
I
that's
mean,
the
at a
time.
certain point in any business, you have to make those decisions. Like, you cannot do everything yourself.
Right. And you can't do them all well. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, that's true. And you know, there's some things that you're going to naturally be better at, and maybe you focus on those things, and the things that you're not as good at, maybe those are the things you outsource. Say like, hey, I'm not really that good at creating a newsletter. Maybe I outsource that to a virtual assistant. Or, you know, I can't produce high quality video on my own. I need someone to help me with this,
Right.
which is totally fine and good. I think it's actually a really important skill to recognize what you're good at and what you're not, and outsource the things that you're not,
Right.
because you're wasting your energy too.
Especially, you might be decent at something, but you hate it. So as you're doing it, it's dragging you back 2 steps instead of moving you forward.
Absolutely.
All right, I know we could talk for a million hours.
Yeah,
but
it's been great. It's been
Let me ask you this just for my own knowledge, because I'm pretty clueless. Can you explain Snapchat to me, and if I should be using it as a 47-year-old person who mainly performs for people 10 to 15 years on either side of me? So,
Right.
you know, the 32-year-old up to the newly retired is kind of my audience.
yeah.
Should I spend any time on Snapchat, or should I be aware that eventually all the people I'm performing for are going to die, and the people that are younger than me will be on
That's a good,
Snapchat and
interesting
it'll be
point.
untapped? Just give me a nutshell.
So the thing that's been interesting about it is, so I'm actually fairly new to Snapchat as well. And it's not a channel that I have spent a ton of time investing in. However, it is really important for branding. And I will say that it is a younger audience, as you mentioned. You know, there's the 12 to 24-year-olds
Right.
who are most active with it. However, you know, it's kind of like Facebook in the way where it's just grown so rapidly. Remember when Facebook was just college kids?
Right.
And then suddenly it was like everybody was on it. The same thing is happening on Snapchat. Well, I saw an article that was like, you know, kids are getting worried because old people are getting on Snapchat.
Yeah, I think I saw the same article.
Is like, which is hilarious. Like, kids are worried that it's going to be ruined or something, which is really funny.
Right.
But it's a little tougher. Again, it's a branding thing. It's a long game thing. So I think it's worth with any with any social media channel. I'll download the app. I'll play around with it. See if it's, you know, again, maybe not something that I am going to invest like all my free time in.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's worthwhile for sure.
What can it do that the other ones can't? Is there something that's uniquely...
Well, so I've heard it described as, the thing about it is it's the closest to a one-on-one face-to-face interaction than any other social media channel. Meaning, like, you're walking down the street and you see someone in the street and you converse with them, and then that moment's over. That's kind of what Snapchat is. You know, it's and so because of that, it's just grown into this like communication, you know, this massive. There are more people that use that than LinkedIn. There are more people that use that than Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are more people that use that than Pinterest. Again, I can't tell you whether it's right for you or not, because again, you know, obviously there's a lot of factors that weigh into that
Sure.
decision, including your time and just everything else that you already have on your plate. But I think, is it worth, if you have some downtime over the weekend and you want to play around with it and see how it works and see if you like it? Yeah.
So
definitely.
But basically those conversations disappear after, is it 24 hours? What's the...
It depends. You can
Is that
set
something
it.
you can set?
Yeah, you can set it. I think that's a good question, because in the beginning I know it was just 10 seconds, but I think it's actually increased. I think you can set it to 20. It'll disappear in 24 hours.
So that just, as a content creator, is like...
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to download some quicksand. If I can get enough people in that quicksand in that 24-hour period, it was worth it. And if I don't, it's not worth my time.
Well-
but it is about building stories over time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, they actually did add a new feature recently. I think it's called Moments. Hopefully I'm not confusing that with Twitter, but I know they've added a feature where things do stick around a little bit longer. So again, I mean, I think it's worth experimenting with, mainly just because of the sheer growth. Again, I'll admit it's not something that's came super intuitive to me either.
Right.
I've had to ask people like, why should I be on this? What's the value? You know, I'm in my 30s, so I'm not quite in the demo, you know, the prime demo for it either. But, you know, I see a lot of people in my niche. Again, like, are people in your niche using it? Is your audience there? Maybe they're not, but some of them probably are.
Maybe.
You know?
I think most of mine are at Sam's Club, just kind of getting free samples all day. They're in their golden years, a lot of them.
Yeah, but you know, but that's the thing that's so interesting about social media is how quickly things change. It's like, who would have thought when I was in college and first got on Facebook, I never would have thought that like my parents would be friending me on there.
And what just blew my mind is that you were in college when Facebook came out. Like I was still changing my first kid's diapers when Facebook came out. Like so, like you were kind of in it when. I wouldn't say all college kids have a ton of free time, but they have a lot more free time than once you become a serious adult. So you were immersed in it probably pretty heavy when it first came out. I mean, there wasn't even YouTube when I was in college.
My first 2 years. So what was hilarious about Facebook was it started with just the Ivy League schools had access to it, if you remember. Harvard and all the big. So like I went to UMass. So like it didn't trickle down to like the lowly state schools until until like a certain point. So like, you know, it was like my friends that went to like, you know, the fancy schools like had access to this thing called Facebook for like the first 2 years. It wasn't until I was a junior in college that I had access to Facebook.
Wow.
which was pretty crazy. I mean, you think like what kid now goes to college and doesn't have Facebook? Right. I mean, for me, like I didn't have it for the first 2 years of college. Like what was my life like before that? It's like before Facebook. Like I don't remember what it was like before that, but I do remember not having it until my junior year.
Yeah, I do know before Facebook I would go to sleep a lot faster because I wouldn't like make sure the fear of missing out, you know.
Oh my gosh.
But here's what I've done to save time on Facebook. Just I'll throw in one life hack for me is I'll quickly log on. If there's not a red flag at the top where somebody's trying to message me, friend me, or an update that I really want to see, I'll close it right out. I'm not going to go looking for things. I figure if somebody's trying to find me on there, I'll respond and I'll check in 2 or 3 times a day like that. But if there's not something at the top, drop it. Nothing's going on.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it can be definitely a time suck, and I'm not really sure. This is something maybe to take a look at, and you may have some experience with this, but I'm actually in a ton of Facebook groups. Facebook has really invested a lot of resources into building their groups, and I'm in like multiple communities. I've gotten clients from that. I've learned a ton of stuff about blogging and digital marketing. I mean, there's literally groups dedicated to like anything that you could think about. And again, I don't know if that exists for the comedy world.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure it does, but just as a way of networking.
Like, Rick posting about 80 groups every Friday.
But you know, but
it does make an impact.
If you think about it though, it's like being able to just, I don't know, like going in a Facebook group, somebody posted like a win, you know, as a comic or whatever. I'm not sure exactly what groups you're in, but let's say they posted like, oh yeah, I got this awesome show or whatever it may be, and you just like it. Okay, there's your little like interaction with that person. That's, you know, that could also, that's a way of networking, you know. I see it the same way as like going and having coffee with someone or going and having drinks with someone. And the truth is that we all have such limited time. Networking is so important in any industry. Facebook groups, I feel like it really cuts down on the amount of time, you know, especially people that don't live in the same place that you do. I
like it because that is where my audience is, and that's where new comedians are for this podcast. You know, they're promoting themselves, so I can kind of see what they're doing, and I see them asking a lot of questions. You know, they're starting out, so I try to answer some of those on the podcast and, you know, get that. Sometimes I'll say, hey, this is a great question. I'll give you a short answer now, but can I mention your name and this question on the podcast?
That's awesome.
So it creates interesting content that's very specific and timely for the people that follow the show.
Is there a Facebook group for this podcast?
There is.
Oh,
I believe. I don't know if it's a page or a group. That's a good question.
I was going to say, because that seems like something that would be like...
Yeah, maybe I should check that and flip it over to what it should be.
Well, no, but like
there's a page.
But that's cool though. That's cool. You know, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of artists and a lot of just business owners and again creative people in general creating a group for like all their followers, and they get a lot of really great content that way, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
you know, ideas. People that have podcasts, they'll have Facebook groups, and like they get a lot of ideas for shows. They get requests, they get questions. It's kind of just this way of like keeping everything all together. I don't know about you, but my email inbox is out of control.
Yeah,
so anything to like cut back on that email inbox, I think can be a good thing for all of us.
Yeah, maybe I will just start a Facebook group for just the listeners of the podcast.
That could be cool.
That way they can interact without me being there. I think I've got a page where I have to allow something to be added to the timeline right now. But a group is just the Wild West.
It'd be really
and I can
cool.
go in there
And plus, like sometimes it's kind of cool because you learn from each other too. I mean, it's amazing the amount of, and it's searchable too. Like sometimes I'm in some groups, some blogging groups, and I'm like, say I'm looking up a plugin. Like I want to learn more about Yoast plugin. I just search Yoast, and there's a whole thread that people are having a bunch of conversations about it. It's pretty cool. You know, it just lives in there forever.
Yeah, it's something I should do for sure. Because I think I've just had the page, but not the group.
Which is awesome too.
A page helps. It gives me at least one point, but Well, there's a million things I can ask you.
Oh, I know.
I'm gonna let you go now. I know a lot of my listeners their heads are about to explode with all these different things that you've talked about. I'll have really good show notes for this episode. She's already said she sent me some of the links that she talked about.
Yeah, some links to some more in-depth articles on. I have an article I've written about building, working on your email list. I have a couple articles on Snapchat, which I think would be helpful. There's like a really awesome guide that I found at the Buffer. Again, they're kind of the experts on all things social media since they have their social media scheduling platform, but a really good, like, everything you need to know about Snapchat, which I included. And also I have an article that I wrote about how I've gotten freelance gigs from social media that I have on my blog. I included that too, just because I think it's good to see that, these things can, again, getting gigs, like you said, you're getting gigs through relationships you're building that you've built over the years. And social media, I mean, I think it's everything. I say that because it's my job, but like, I really, really, it's so important. Especially
as an artist, a comedian, a speaker. I think if you guys don't go over to Cashville Skyline and follow Kate, you're kind of crazy. If you've listened this far, I think you probably have already gone to check it out. But make sure you check it out. I'll put her blog in the show notes as well. Follow her on Twitter. I'll put that link on there as well. Mm-hmm. I'll put all of your things so people can find you. Because some people
the Cashville Skyline links are where I'm most. I have a few different Twitter accounts, but the Cashville Skyline is definitely where I'm most, especially if you're interested in things related to money.
Right.
And money specifically for I'm trying to really focus on money for creatives, helping creatives with, for those of us that don't necessarily have a steady 9-to-5, or those of us that have uneven income, that kind of stuff. That's sort of the direction that my side business is going. So hopefully there'll be more helpful things in the future with that.
I'm sure they'll dig it. Thanks again, Kate, for working me into your schedule today.
No, thank you for coming on down to East Nashville to chat about social media.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go pick me up some cool threads on the way out. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick.
There you go. Kate Dore delivered again. I hope you took some notes, got some things written down, and put some of those tactics that she talked about into use. I mean, there's a million things you can do right now with social media, and you don't have to do them all, as we learned with Kate, but find 2 or 3 where your audience is and engage and interact with them right there. Provide them with stuff they find valuable. They'll share it. Find people that do the things that you like and share their content, and that eases your load as a content creator. All kinds of great stuff. I know there was a lot in there. If you are on the Patreon support team, my Laugh Partners, you will get a full written transcript of this episode and this first one, the entire interview, over an hour and 10 minutes, broken out to you in about 28 pages. You can go back, highlight, take notes, whatever you want to do on that. So Patreon supporters, be on a lookout for that. And also bookmark August 20th from 1 to 2 Central Standard Time for our Google Hangout. A couple of quick announcements before I get going. I'd like to start off here with a quick iTunes review that we received back on July 25th. This one here is from P. Swizzy. Man, I love these iTunes names, nicknames. P. Swizzy. Hey, I listen to Rick, always. I binge listen to the podcast when I travel. I'm currently trying to get the courage to do an open mic, and these shows are just the encouragement I need. Hey, P. Swizzy, you haven't got on stage yet? Looking for your first open mic? That's exciting. I can remember those days. Actually, I got on stage before I even knew I was doing comedy. That's how crazy my start was. So I know there's a lot of tension there, a lot of excitement. Let me know when you get on stage, how it goes, and what you're looking to improve after you hit that stage the first time. Always good to get an iTunes reviews. I know I ask you guys for a lot of things, but those really make my day when I see a new one pop in there. Okay, that's it. Besides this last little announcement, if you're in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area, Harrison, Tennessee, on August 14th, I'll be joining Ken Kington, very funny comedian, at the Church of the Highlands right there in Harrison, Tennessee, right there on Hunter Road. That show's going to be an early 6 p.m. start. It's going to be mostly Ken Kington, and I'll be joining in for a little set there in the middle somewhere, 15, 20 minutes of some stand-up. So find out more about that. You can go right now to my website, rickroberts.com, and shoot me a quick email, and I'll let you know more details. Or just go ahead and go to the church website, www.thehighlands.cc. That's www.thehighlands.cc on Sunday, August 14th. And again, thanks to the Clean Comedy Conference for sponsoring this podcast. The Clean Comedy Conference will be in San Diego, California, October 13th through the 15th, year 2016. And I say that because this podcast will live on in infamy. But, there's an old adage in comedy that clean is green. That means clean plays everywhere and clean pays everywhere. If you want to learn more about how to perform clean and to make money doing it, you want to attend this conference. You're going to learn from professional comics and bookers such as Eddie Brill, Jimmy Brogan, Charlene May, Amy Piddle, Tony Calabrese, Scott Wood, and others. All these guys and gals are going to address the challenges and also the rewards of making money as a clean comedian. In addition to working at comedy venues, many of these speakers and panelists have written for TV, they've booked clubs, colleges, churches, cruise ships, or late night, and they've worked and opened for and selected comics for like The Tonight Show and David Letterman. So lots of great insight, years and years. I bet if you summed up and added all of the speakers' comedy years, you're looking at over 100 years, maybe 120 years plus of comedy knowledge. So where else can you get that in 3 days? Nowhere. Just the old Clean Comedy Conference in San Diego. Early bird registration is about to wrap up. It ends August 15th, so you've got a couple days left here to get in on it. CleanComedyConference.com. If you get in there early, you'll save some money on the cost. And as a thank you to School of Laughs listeners, use promo code School of Laughs for a special $10 discount. So get up those discounts right now, folks. CleanComedyConference.com. Head over there today. Until next time, this is Rick Roberts on the School of Laughs podcast. Have a great weekend. Stay funny and stay safe out there.
For listening to the School of Laughs podcast. If you'd like to hear more School of Laughs podcasts, you can find them on iTunes and Stitcher.com. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. For information on upcoming live and online classes, visit schooloflaughs.com. Until next time, stay tuned, stay focused, and stay funny.
This episode is also brought to you by the Clean Comedy Conference, which takes place this year, October 13th through 15th in San Diego, California. There's an adage in stand-up comedy that clean is green, and that means two things. It means, one, that clean plays everywhere, and two, it can lead to some cash. At this conference, you're going to learn about this from professional comedians and bookers such as Eddie Brill, Jimmy Brogan, Charlene May, Amy Piddle, Tony Calabrese, and Scott Wood. And they're going to address how to navigate the challenges of making money as a clean comedian. In addition to working at clean comedy venues, most of these speakers and panelists have written for television and booked clubs, colleges, churches, cruise ships, and late-night TV such as Letterman. So listen up. You want to check this conference out. The theme for this year is Clean Isn't a Dirty Word. Come out and find out for yourself why. Early bird registration ends August 15th, so sign up today at cleancomedyconference.com. And as a thank you to School of Laughs listeners, use promo code School of Laughs for a special $10 discount. Again, go to cleancomedyconference.com for more information today.